Good morning again.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. I would say this is probably nice to formally meet you now because I think we've probably seen each other at a couple events, and I definitely saw you at the chef conference, but we didn't get to chat much. So I'm excited to chat with you a little bit more today.
Yeah, me too. Everybody I know seems to know you, so great to
Same,
connect.
same. I did want to dig a little bit into your background a bit personally because I know you went to Wharton and. Growing up, my father passed away when I was 16, but he always wanted me to go to Wharton, and I went to culinary school instead. And I always feel like he would have been disappointed. But then I started running, opening a bunch of businesses, and you learn as as you go there. But first off, congrats on the James Beard. That's amazing.
Thank you.
How does that feel? Because I know I know when you started the first restaurant, like 27 years ago or whatever it was, you just wanted to stay open for 5 years, which that makes sense. But how does it feel now? Fast forward, almost 3 decades later, and winning Outstanding Restaurateur from James Beard.
Well, I would say, I don't really, I haven't really thought about that as a possibility, because I don't really, do what I do to try to get awards or anything like that. I just love what I do. Um, but it never hurts to receive recognition. And I'm certainly honored. I think that once you win, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with it, including living up to everything that people expect from you. So it is a lot of pressure, but, I feel incredibly lucky to be noticed. And, like I said, I think that there's so many talented people out there. How a person gets the award, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I did a little bit of background before this conversation, and what is so evidently clear, Ellen, is like it's so clear, like you just love the restaurant industry. It's really refreshing just to hear you talk about it and sit down and eat. It's like, wow, you are a patron as much as an operator, and I don't think anybody that sets out, just says, I just want to be a billionaire, I just want to be a James Beard Award winner. That's typically not the best way to go about something. You usually want to say, I want to, be great at this thing, or I really love this thing. And so it's really nice to see, that recognition from externally as a chef and restaurant owner, because you care, you really do care. I can tell. I don't know you that well, but I can say for sure, just from hearing you talk, that you really love what you do and you love the industry. You also happen to love gluten a lot, which is cool. We can talk about that. But what's taking up, like, most of your brain power right now? Or maybe even said a different way, like what's keeping you up at night right now?
We are growing, and growing is really exciting. It's also very challenging in a lot of ways because there's so many things that you're trying to evolve, but at the same time, things about yourself, your group, your colleagues that you want to retain. And so I think that that's one of the most challenging things right now. We are in the midst of planning a new restaurant in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
D.C. that's opening hopefully this summer.
That's the
Um,
A Kitchen, right, in DC.
a kitchen and bar in Washington, D.C. So we are really excited about that. Um, Trying to figure out how to best maintain our culture. So, after the pandemic in particular, I mean, I think culture has always been something that, and I know that you're friends with Eli Culp, that, he and I have talked about over the years, is how do you create a positive culture? How do you create a place where you retain, team members and help them grow and develop? And so this is the perfect opportunity to do all that. But at the same time, it's nerve wracking because you're also creating something that is brings a level of uncertainty in terms of people who you might not have the opportunity to work as closely as if you were all in the same restaurant. And, first you're in the same restaurant, then you're in the same city, then you're in the same group. So, it starts to grow, and making sure that we have the support system to ensure that they have everything that they need to maintain that culture and succeed in delivering the standards that we've worked really hard to create over 20 some years.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you know this better than most, and I've had experienced it well, where like, you take a concept that's working really well. You know, I've had concepts in New York that worked really well, and then we plop them in Chicago on State Street, and it just flops. and and there's you know, there's a transition. You know, obviously one, I think, and I want to hear more from you about culture, because good culture is important, and also like definable, like what is the culture, so that you can, you know, then sort of promulgate it to the rest of your team. But maybe just winding up for a little bit, like, because you had High Street on Hudson in New York, and pandemic happened. I'm sure you learned a ton from that. What are you now going into DC, another new market, which maybe is more similar to Philly than it is to New York? Like, what are you looking out for? What are you spending more time on now? You know, taking this concept and moving it to another city, and considering more that you learned from you know, from High Street when you took it to New York.
Well, High Street on Hudson was a unique situation, I think. First of all, we were really excited to open. This location was adorable. It felt like the perfect location.
It was awesome.
But I think we didn't really understand that location as well as we could have. And, you know, we studied the West Village. We, of course, knew Manhattan from, you know, Eli's experience there, but we really didn't understand this particular corner. And there were a lot of things that were just kind of funky about it. First being that, of course, Eli's accident changed a lot of what happened in New York City, but the direction of the street, the fact that it was so far west, the fact that you know, there was a playground across the street. I mean, all these things that you did, these variables that maybe sound like they create a perfect thing in Philadelphia might not be the perfect thing in New York for what you're doing. Also, we have this problem that we're super ambitious, and High Street is a very ambitious concept. It has to do with the bread. It has to do with local. It had a sustainable wine program, all these things that we were doing. And the space was only 1,900 square feet. It was really hard to cram all this talent and concept into a tiny little space. So I think if we had maybe taken one component of what we were doing in Philadelphia, and again, not bringing Philadelphia to New York, but taking the bread or whatever the thing that we thought we did best, and making that what people in New York want and enjoyed, was, you know, part of, I think, what we learned about opening in a new concept in a new city. So going into Washington, D.C., of course, we are trying our best to study the Foggy Bottom neighborhood as much as possible, understand the restaurant scene as much as possible. I would say that DC is interesting because it has a lot of components of Philadelphia. It's a very strong restaurant community. It's really important to integrate yourself into that community, be supportive of the community, give back to the community, and represent that community. So we are trying really hard to do that. It also has some components of New York, a lot of international visitation, as well as a strong residential base in the downtown area. What is unusual, I think, is the flow and the impact of the presidential, you know, who's in and who's changing, and all the transiency of that part of the community.
Yeah.
So these are all things that we are trying to, like, you know, get a handle over.
Yeah. How does that manifest the community involvement? Like, what are you doing now to plan for how you're going to be involved in the community in a brand new city?
trying to meet as many people in the hospitality industry as possible, joining things like Regarding Her, being part of the DC Restaurant Association, which is strong. Trying to meet as many people in our immediate neighborhood as possible, doing collaboration. So we
Yeah.
just did an event with Oyster, which was really fun.
Hmm.
Rob generously introduced us to several of his customers and colleagues, so that was incredible. Um, so
Right.
yeah,
Isn't
we're
that
having
cool
fun.
about the restaurant industry? That like there's not many other industries where you open up another store in a new city and you sort of, you know, commiserate with all of the other restaurateurs in order to to build that community. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think that it depends on the type of restaurant you want to be. Of course, we are part of AKA, which is our hotel partner, but they are even more of a community-based organization in the sense that they serve people who are staying there for longer periods of time than just overnight stays. So, when you look at Washington, D.C. and the restaurant landscape, of course, there's large restaurant chains, but I think we really affiliate ourselves and see ourselves as an independent community based restaurant. We want to serve the neighborhood. We want to serve, the people who work and live in the area. So to do that, we really have to, plunge
Yeah.
into the community.
Yeah. Um, now you have a decent amount of concepts now. A kitchen, you have another a kitchen bar opening. You got Fork, High Street, the Hoagies, the bakery, the Wonton project. Um, the, you, you are opening more concepts and growing. I'm curious. For me, I always think about with businesses, we have to grow because you have to have upward mobility for your team, and
Mhm.
they otherwise, what are they going to do? They're going to have to move somewhere else unless you have sort of horizontal growth where you just like have CPG things or other other things within the four walls. But like, do you ever think about what the catalyst is for opening the next thing? Like when is the when and what is the impetus for like, okay, now I need to open another one? Is it opportunistic or is it like team based?
Well, I would say that originally my impetus for growth was definitely having a place for our team members to expand their, career and development toward. Um, I realized after 15 years that I was just in a cycle where I was constantly every 5 years trying to reinvent and trying to find a new chef. And that's a really hard, frustrating place to be, especially when you're not a chef. And I think that um, there's a few of us out there who are truly restaurateurs who don't actually do the cooking, or have that background.
Can I actually ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I'm super curious about this because so it's been again over 25 years now with Fork, and you have all these other concepts now as well. But what's super interesting to me is basically every 5 years you have a new chef. Anne-Marie Lasher, and you have Tigno and Terrence, and then Eli, and then John, and then now George. That's a lot of change, and um, it's your vision, it's your business, right? And now you have to sort of plug in a new chef, and of course, make sure that they can like have a piece of their vision in the food,
Hmm.
but that has to also be aligned with the thing that you're building. And I promise there's a question here, but like I I now have this sort of like technology company, and I'm in this position where I'm a chef, and I have this technology company where I don't know how to freaking code, um, but I find it very helpful. There's like a very clear thing that I want to build, and I can kind of communicate that to engineers and technologists and have them help build this thing. I do feel sometimes a little bit powerless of like, man, I want this and this, but I can't even do it. Um, what do you think are are some of the like advantages and disadvantages of being a restaurant owner and operator and not being a chef? And then and also like how do you maintain your vision as you add on more like culinary talent?
Well, that relationship between business and creativity is, I think, what excites me the most. You see that in many different industries, like you see that in the publishing industry. You see people who are writers or graphic designers, and you see the people who have to like sell the ads to make the magazine work or produce the book to make the book work. So I think that it's not an uncommon relationship, and it's something that really excites me because I am kind of an artist in a way. I mean, as a restaurateur, I feel like I am curating an experience, and that's what is exciting for me. And whether the chef is um, wants to make food that's influenced by Asia or Latin America or whatever it is, I feel like I could take the right person and have them fit into my vision as long as they have some key points which are integral to our mission. One is they have to be committed to supporting the local economy. So that was something from day one that we have always been committed to, is buying from local farmers, buying from local artisans, however you want to say it, whether that is an economic support or whether that's supporting local farmers, local artisans, however you want to like um, phrase that, that is something that's really important to us. Having the opportunity to take your creativity in many different ways is part of our mission statement. So you can be a creative person and be a business person. You can be a creative person and be a chef, but it all has to make the overall mission of the organization work, which is that we are about an organization that's committed to sustainability, that we are committed to our team members and to the community, being a learning organization. So we do train and support many people through their career, whether they're starting out as high school students, as CIA graduates, you know, general managers who want to become owners, whatever that is, we are committed to that career development. So those things, whatever that chef who comes in has to accept those those concepts as part of their personal mission. And if they can accept that, then, you know, then we can make it work. But if they can't accept that, then, you know, then they're probably not in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is really interesting. So those are sort of operational tenets, you know, where you buy from, how you treat your team, things like that. But you are creative, right? You can't have a business for 25 plus years, especially a restaurant business, and not have this vision of what it is and how your customer should experience, you know, this space that you have. And it's clearly, there's a level of consistency because it's worked over a long period of time. So, like, what is like the through line that you sort of ask these chefs to maintain, from an experience like perspective that they have to do with the food, you know, to the guest? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Sorry if that's confusing.
We are hospitality forward. So, I mean, whatever the food that's cooked, they are part of the hospitality experience. And so that means that there's a certain level of flexibility, addressing people with allergies, making sure that the food is timely. You know, I mean, we all have been in situations where there's a problem with somebody's experience, whether that's that they waited too long for their table, whether they had too long of a gap between their first course and their entree, whether they didn't like something, whatever it is, we're about fixing it and creating the experience for our guests that makes them want to come back.
Yeah.
And so they have to be part of that.
Yep.
So, you know, and of course we want the food to be delicious and make people want to come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's part of it. But that part of it is, to me, something that is collaborative and that we work together on. And I'm not in your sandbox, you know, 24 hours a day. I'm actually pretty hands off. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we create the sandbox together and that we have a statement that fits into the things that I just talked about. But those things that they may sound like they're operational, but they are really crucial to the success of the business. And then, of course, all the values that we profess: integrity, you know, um, mutual respect, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. And are there any sort of guardrails or boundaries that you set on the kitchen side? And I apologize, I'm talking so much about the kitchen, but I'm just super curious.
On the food?
Yeah, like like something that you're like, that's just not a fork type, dish, or maybe whether it's a style or an ingredient. We're like, okay, let's stay away from that.
I mean, obviously I have a lot of opinions. And I try to, work together with whoever it is to make sure that we start to get as close to whatever that vision is. At the very, very beginning, it can be difficult because you're working with somebody who has a vision of their food. So when we bring on a new chef, the onboarding process includes them seeing what we do. We invite them in for dinner. They can see what we have been doing. We'd like to see what they have been doing and what their vision of the food should be. And then we try to create a line that we,
Yeah.
walk together.
Yeah. Okay, this is my last question about the kitchen, I promise, and then we're gonna talk about other. Is there I'm curious if there is a process that you that you use in order to vet a chef, or what do you look for in a chef independent of the operational tenets and obviously making good food? Are there other things, whether it's skill sets or heuristics or things that you look for in a chef that are like, that's a chef for fork?
I think servant leadership is a really important one. I think that person's temperament and belief in the culture and the culture that we've worked to create. It's not a combative one. It is one where everybody in the organization is collaborating together. And that means sometimes hearing feedback from the front of the house, sometimes hearing feedback from guests, hearing feedback from myself, treating everybody, having the right attitude about the entire team. I think it's very team and leadership based. They don't have to be, they don't have to have necessarily a lot of experience. I mean, Anne Marie came in, she had never been an executive chef. George had never been an executive chef, but Terrence Fury certainly had been, and Eli had been CDC, but I don't think ever really an executive chef. So I think that Fork in particular is a great platform for somebody who's never been an executive chef to kind of have the right, perfect size restaurant. We have 68 seats and 14 bar stools. An amazing team of professionals supporting on the hospitality side, and that they can make their vision really blossom.
Yeah. How do you vet for that servant leadership? Is there something that you ask or look for?
Well, I definitely check references. Try to see how they interact when they come in for stage. Ask as many questions about their philosophy about management. Some of them may not have a philosophy on management yet, but I think sometimes it is a gut instinct. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of like leadership, I mean, I don't know about you. Like when I think about the first restaurant I opened, my first business in like 2009, I'm kind of embarrassed with like how I led my team. And I had to learn. I mean, I had never been a owner or even I was I think a CDC at most before that. Are there ways that you lead differently today than you did 25 plus years ago? And other things that are still the same from then to now?
Well, it's funny because I think the thing that helped me succeed the most was the fact that I didn't have any experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came at everything because I needed help from everybody. And so I never, and also a lot of the people that I was working with were more experienced than I was. And so I had to be very humble and very appreciative of all the information that they were sharing with me. and listen really carefully. And then as I gained confidence, I guess maybe I could look back at some times when I didn't really like myself, um, and where I could have done better. But overall, I think that as I've grown, so starting from a person who never operated a restaurant, never managed a restaurant, just loved the idea of a restaurant. I had been a server, a bartender, and I can't even say that I managed anybody because I think most of the jobs that I had in my pre-restaurant career were as a consultant creating documents on paper. So I
Yeah.
never operationalized anything in my entire life. So, coming from that perspective and basically at the same time that the restaurant industry was changing, technology has been changing.
Yeah.
And so I've constantly had to adapt to new things. I mean, Open Table was not a thing in 1997. The Instagram was not a thing in 1997. In 2010, Instagram was barely
Yeah.
a thing.
Google wasn't really
And
even a thing.
yeah, I mean, none of these things were really in existence. And so just constantly having to adapt and learn, adapt and learn. I mean, I remember, when I was in college, even having to learn Lotus 1, 2, 3 and WYSIWYG. So, I mean, I think that throughout my career, I've been in those type of positions. And so now as a multi entity operator, I'm still learning
Yeah.
because I'm trying to learn how to share information that previously maybe I wasn't so willing to share.
Hmm.
I mean, I think I was always willing to share, but giving a very top level view of things. But now, with the advent of things like meez or with Restaurant 365 or QuickBooks or
Yeah.
whatever all these platforms are, how do you use that to get to where you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, it's funny too. I think that I don't know when this clicked. Maybe it clicked for you right away. I think part of the problem when you become a leader coming from a kitchen, or at least kitchens back, in the day when they were a little different. There was basically, just in the late '90s, 2000s, there was a lot of screaming, and there was no real management. Um, the only the only like metric of success as a leader is the product good and are the customers happy. And I don't know about you. I'm gonna assume this is the case because just of how you've built your business. But like, there's this sort of turning point where the metric of success is that your team is happy and your team is actually growing and being more productive. And that's like that's a chasm to cross where you have to like look at when your team
Mhm.
members get better as like, oh, that's how I know I'm doing a good job. Is that something um, that you measure or quantify or think about today with the team that you have? Like, how
Mhm.
well are they growing and what else are they doing?
Well, from day one, I think my personality is that I love to help people and support people, and I love to see people come in and grow. So whether you stay for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, however long, I want to see. I gain personal satisfaction from seeing that person change and develop and grow. So I mean, right now, my leadership team, several of them have had multiple stints at Fork or one of our restaurants and come back after working for somebody else or having their own business. And that makes me feel great, of course. But I think that that's been an important part for me, especially, I feel a personal failure when I hire somebody and they don't work out for whatever reason, because we spend a lot of time vetting people. We interview them, we bring them in for a stage, we check their references, we really maybe have multiple interviews, whether you're a server or management. And there's a certain commitment that we make after you start training that we really want you to succeed. And so I personally feel like it's a little bit for me of a personal failure when somebody isn't the right fit. Like, what did we do to not vet them properly to make them feel like they love it here?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I feel the same, by the way. And basically with everything, I have some pictures on my wall that I talk about probably more often than my wife would like. One of them is how are you complicit in the environment that you're complaining about, basically. And there's this acronym I use for well, anything that goes wrong in my businesses, specifically with the team. It's thin, and the acronym is thin, which is basically like if anybody does something, so something happens that went wrong, it's I either didn't train them enough, I hired the wrong person for the wrong job, I didn't inspire them enough, or I didn't nurture them the way that they specifically need to be nurtured, because people need to be managed in different ways. There's very few times when somebody messes something up and it's not actually on us in some way we create an environment where like we didn't give them the right, parameters to succeed. And it's stressful in one way, but it's also really, like it's a big weight off as well, because it's like, okay, this is on me. How did I, it does, by the way, it does suck when you like realized you hired the wrong, that's probably the worst feeling when you realized, I don't know about you, like when you realized you hired the wrong person, like, man, because they're probably good and just not for the thing that you need. Has that happened to you before?
Often. For 30 years, often.
What do you fire fast, or what do you do like when that happens?
Well, I'm probably my biggest flaw is that I want to give people too many chances.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just not good for the rest of the team to give that many chances because they see somebody who's impacting them. And, we're a very team based organization. So tips are shared, work is shared. And so when you have somebody who is not contributing in that way, we try to give as many chances as we possibly can, but sometimes at some point you have to cut the cord. And that is for me, I hate it. I feel like I've let that person down
Yeah,
and I'm not good at that.
same. Yeah, it really is terrible because most of the time it's on us. We just didn't pick them for the right role, or um. Anyways, well, one thing you mentioned is that people come back and they work again at Fork, which is pretty awesome. By the way, I'm like kind of embarrassed to admit this because I've been in New York for like 24 some odd years, and I went to the chef conference last month, and I was like, I don't think I've ever been to Philly before. And I grew up in Virginia, and I'm like, yeah, if I've been to Philly, I must have been like, before memory started, like 2 or 3 years old. And wow, what a great restaurant scene it is. It's pretty incredible. I was blown away. My question for you is, and I have two, because one's just basically I just want to learn about Philly. But if you had to ask like a team member, any given team member that works at High Street Hospitality, why they work there, because with all the places they could go and work at, what do you think they would say? It's like why they chose to work, at High Street.
I think that the answer would probably be unanimously about the quality of coworkers that they have. And at each restaurant, I want to say cohort because, after many years, there's
Hmm.
like groups. Um, each cohort is very strong together and they stay friends for years and years. But it really is about how much respect that they have for their teammates and the fact that their teammates are there to support them. So I would 95% say that, if you asked people why would they work there versus someplace else, that would be the answer.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I love that, by the way. I mean, I think that's such a great uh, attribute of the restaurant business as well, right? And really any
Yeah,
business where
because
there's a craft is you have this camaraderie, that gets built, and it's compounding.
it's hard because, I mean, financial is still a important component. But I don't think that we are, you know, we, we are not probably the highest paying. We are not the hardest driving in terms of like, nobody's working, um, you know, 21 shifts in a row or doubles every single day or anything like that. We try to, be respectful of people's time, give people the time off that they need. We do have benefits. and things like that to try to
Smart.
encourage retention. I overall, I would say it definitely is the people.
I love that. Um, so I'm just now learning more about the Philly scene. I've been meaning to take my kids there because there's so many awesome museums.
Hmm.
But what do you think is unique about the Philly restaurant? I hate the word scene, by the way, but the Philly restaurant scene versus, New York, LA, Chicago, DC.
Well, I think if you ask any chef in the city, they would say it's the collaborative nature and the support that you get from your colleagues. I mean, obviously it's a competitive business, but people are there to create the overall, everybody wants the entire city to win and not just any one, individual restaurant or restaurant group or anything like that. So you will get support from anybody that you ask. Um, we have, our organization. I'm just going to make a plug for it. Sisterly Love Collective. We are women who are trying to support each other and helping each other grow their businesses. That exists because of that collaborative nature. And, you know, um, uh, other restaurant group owners, whether it be Michael Schulzen, Stephen Starr, Mark Vetri, Cook and Solo, Val and Marcy, any of these larger restaurant groups, I think, we definitely have the opportunity for dialogue amongst us. And, we all just want the city to grow and thrive. And, we all love it here. So I think that is the thing that makes the Philly food scene thrive. The other thing that is really unique, two things that are unique. One is that or Pennsylvania is a state-run liquor-controlled state. So
Hmm.
that is something that makes it challenging to operate in Philadelphia. But at the same time, the opportunity for people to start businesses, even when they are less experienced, or if they're able to raise the capital to do so, the capital to open a new restaurant in Philadelphia is not as daunting as opening in another major metropolitan city. And that makes it easier to take risks, um, easier to generally succeed. And then that opens the door for future growth.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. I mean, the cost of a restaurant in New York is pretty insane. Um,
Also, the cost of living in Philadelphia is modest relative to other major metropolitan cities. So, one thing I learned in New York, I had the luxury of taking Amtrak to New York, an hour and 10
hmm
minutes door to door. But that's the same commute that many of my team members had. And I'm imagining it's going to be similar in Washington, D.C. And that is a real mental challenge. And
hmm
that makes it so that work is, creating that positive culture is going to be even more important when we open
Yeah,
in Washington, D.C., because that commute can be draining. The other thing is, you get to work and, the way that the labor laws are structured, it makes it really difficult because operators are like, well, you can't come to work early. You need to clock in when you're scheduled. Things like that don't make people feel like their professionalism is appreciated.
yeah, yeah,
That's, I'm just saying, is,
yeah. I wonder
like
if there's like a um. I wonder if there's something that you could do with the train, where there's some sort of like book club or something with all that time from Philly to DC, subsidizing
um,
like, Kindle or something.
Yeah, I don't know,
There,
but I'm not saying that higher wages. Obviously, higher wages is positive, but it's this challenge where restaurants need to really figure out how to operate in a more like the business model we all said during COVID needs to be reinvented, and yet I feel like so much of our industry has just kind of fallen into what it was before. And
yeah.
so a city like Philadelphia allows you the opportunity to try new things. For example, we're doing something with service charges at High Street where we pay a flat hourly rate. Everybody makes the credit card tips on top of that. But when you don't have that room to even experiment or try things. It makes it
Hmm.
really difficult.
Yeah, when in a restaurant in particular, it's always difficult to try things because it's such a. I always relate it to like a Broadway show. It's just every day
Hmm.
it's on, and to
Yeah,
stop in the
that's right.
middle is really tough. So I'm going to zoom out for a second, and this might be really dumb because it was so long ago, but I'm going to ask you anyways because you went to Wharton. So I'm going to ask you to put your Wharton hat on and your consultant hat, and so sort of zoom out from High Street and just generally speaking, the restaurant. Um, Business model as a whole, because the one thing you mentioned obviously is like we've sort of reverted back to the mean a little bit, and margins continue to just decline obviously because of increased cost in goods and supply chain and things like that, um and the perception of what food should cost doesn't go up much, or at least not anything significant. It's sort of a de minimis increase every year relative to what it should be. If as the food cost increases 30%, the price of the food might increase 4% or something.
Hmm.
So they're definitely not like in line. But from the perspective of like looking at the restaurant business model, um, as a whole, as a business, like if you were to like, go in as a consultant from you graduated, Wharton, you go work at McKinsey or Bain or whatever, and like, okay, come to our come to our business and prescribe for us. How would we take this business model and make it more efficient and optimized for profitability? Like, are there things that you would say as a whole, kind of like wholesale, that the business model would change?
Well, I mean, obviously, everybody's circumstance is different. And that's the whole thing about the hospitality industry. You have such a large swath of business types. So from everything from fast food all the way to high end dining. So, it's really hard to generalize about what works or what doesn't work. But I agree with you that that educating people on what the true cost of food is, what the true margins of a restaurant are. Um, you know, I think that the cost of labor, obviously, being in the bread business, which is the most labor intensive
Mm-hmm.
um, and capital intensive um, operations, makes it really difficult. But you have to kind of figure out how to um, rearrange those numbers because it is a pie, just like every other business. And so you have whatever your revenue is going to be, and that is dictated by so many different things: location, what your concept is, whether or not people want the concept, um, how complicated the concept is. Then that dictates all the other expenses. I mean, you basically just have to figure out how to make your slice your slice work. And for some people, I think that is making team members all hourly and service charging or no service charging. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I could generalize on everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, well, if we just even if we just focus on a couple like full service and fast casual, I guess one question, and I've been thinking about this a lot and talking about it a lot. It's like I wonder how we change the perception of what food should cost. Because when I say food, I don't mean food, the goods, the product, but like when you go to a restaurant, you're paying for an experience. When you go to Fork, you're paying for the years of like you understanding the feeling you should get when you walk in, and what the light should be like, and how dim they should be at what time, and how the music should be, and where seats should be, and how much space between this, and how the servers talk. That's all part of the experience that you pay
Uh-huh.
for, on top of of course the food. How do we get there's no these margins are going to keep getting smaller, right? That's just part of it is like really the price would just need to increase. You pay what you pay for a TV today is much different. Although there's economy of scale, that's different. How do we get like the perception of what food should cost to change?
Well, it's so complicated because in addition to what you just said, people are going out more and more.
Hmm.
So if you looked at, how much money is being spent on food, more is being spent on food and dining out. But yet we all feel this pressure, right? And I think that uh, you know, the fact that, for example, in the old days, dining out was a very special occasion thing that you did. I mean, as children, we hardly ever went out.
Yeah.
And if we did, we were having the whole experience, dessert and
Hmm.
everything, right? Now I go out to eat 365 days a year. How many of those times do I eat dessert? And, just talking in general about, like, we want to have a great dessert program. We want to have a great dessert program, but like maybe that dessert program doesn't look the same way that it used to look. Um, we had a whole pastry department. Um, if you have a prefix, everybody's having dessert. If you are a la carte, not everybody's having dessert. So just those two things dictate how much labor is going to go into desserts, because we all know that the ingredients are probably less expensive on, the dessert component. And the product mix is another thing. I mean, like if you engineer your menu properly, even though prices are going up, you may have some items that are higher in cost, but you might have a lot of
Hmm.
items that are selling really well that are lower in cost. So, I mean, I think that um, I'm not giving you an answer to your question, but
No, well, I think you're.
I think that these things really do impact. And yes, you are paying for the experience, but increasingly the experience is like upping its game all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, and you know, yes, we are getting way better at optimizing profitability with technology and all kinds of other things, and menu engineering, and that's necessary regardless, of what happens. But I think the idea of a service charge is really interesting, right? Because you know we've kind of like rigged the system of we just now go out to eat more often, which means technically you don't have someone doesn't need to clean up your kitchen at home. Someone's serving you hand and foot. Someone's designing a space for you. All of that is like if I had a butler at home and I had a cleaning service that came every day and I had a chef that came and cooked for me. There's a cost to all of that. As opposed to
Mm-hmm.
me cooking it myself. We've sort of outsourced that cost and walk down the block, or maybe taking an Uber, to go to a place where they do all that for you, but not paying, you know, incrementally that much more for it. So I think the idea of a service charge is actually really smart because, especially if you can communicate it the right way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I think what's important is that in aggregate, the industry has to be able to communicate this really well. It's like, hey, this is actually a big part of what you're paying for is all of this stuff on top of the food that's gonna be here.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously it depends on geography, but I did study this significantly before we decided to try service charges. In pork, we just added 20% on because people were generally tipping 23% or more.
Hmm.
So adding a 20% service charge still allows you, if you want to add an additional 3, 4, 5% if you want to. And that is mostly shared to the front of the house, except when the gap is really large between the front and the back of the house, and everybody gets paid at least the minimum wage, um, and we share the tips um,
Yeah.
amongst the kitchen staff as well, just to make it so that on Thanksgiving, for example, we're open. Is it fair for one party to make, $100 an hour? And I'm exaggerating just to,
Hmm.
protect the innocent. And somebody else is making maybe even after holiday pay, maybe they're making $35 an hour. If we share tips on those type of days, it makes it more palatable. And also a lot of the work that are done for these special events is done by the kitchen team.
Yeah.
Um, at High Street, we have the service charge of 20%. It's a little bit more complicated there because we also have like a bakery coffee shop that we don't add service charge to, but in the restaurant we
Hmm.
do. And some people get really upset
Yeah.
because they feel like we're adding 20%. But again, if the tip percentage for High Street was 23%, I didn't feel like that was such a big risk, but it allows us to, you know, share the, service charge amongst a larger swath of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually like it because there's like this, you remove that decision, right? It's like, it's there already.
Yeah, right.
So you have like a bunch of other things that you're doing right now, which I want to learn a little bit more about. Sisterly Love Collective and the Wonton Project, and like all these boards that you're on. Just I'm just super curious how that all works. But before, I'm just curious. We're talking about margins, and you're growing into new concepts. But if are there things that you aren't doing today that if you had exponentially more resources and time and capital that you would be doing that you just can't because of those constraints?
Right. Well, if I had endless resources, it would be a totally different story.
What is that? What is that like? What is that like pie in the sky thing that you would be doing with the endless resources?
Endless resources. Well, I mean, Sisterly Love Collective. I would love to have more workforce training, more educational programming, more opportunities to invest in maybe businesses that haven't typically had access to capital. Um, More opportunities to teach, more opportunities, to do things that I love to do,
Yeah.
which includes serving on all these boards and, volunteer organizations. So, yeah, endless
Yeah.
resources, no problem.
See, this is, by the way, Ellen, this is what again, I'm just getting to know you more. What I love about you is your answer was not, oh, I'm going to open up 100 more places so I can 100x my revenue. It's like, here's all the things that I want to do to, impact change and that I love. And that's what I would do. And I think that's so much of why you're successful. But can you just double click for a minute on Sisterly Love Collective? You've been talking about it a little bit, so I generally understand, what it is, but the genesis of it and what you're trying to do with it.
Right. So, I think everybody in our industry felt completely helpless on March 17th, 18th, whatever time your shutdown happened. And then the light goes on that it's not going to be 3 weeks. It's actually going to be a much longer period of time. And that, by the way, you have no income coming in. And what are you going to do to pay your staff and all your bills that you've racked up 30 days terms over?
Mm-hmm.
So, I was just trying to connect with as many people as I possibly could. And a woman named Rohini Day in Chicago called me and said, "Hey, would you like to join a Zoom call?" And Zoom, by the way, I didn't even know what that was. I mean, I've never been on a Zoom call. She invited me to be part of a group of women in Chicago, and they were basically talking about all the resources of how to approach the city, how to, maybe collaborate on delivering to the suburbs, all these types of, collaborative, economically beneficial opportunities during the pandemic. And so, after the call, she said to me, "Do you think Philadelphia might be interested in starting something like this?" And so we became part of this network of women organizations called Let's Talk. And it was great. We continued to be on calls with each other and with other women in other cities. But what happened was that as we started to reopen, what I noticed about Philly is we are doers. We don't like to talk about it. We just like to do. And so we wanted to make our organization have more activities, one of the first things we did was we raised money for Women Against Abuse in 2021. We had one of the first outdoor events at the Cherry Street Pier, and we invited 20 restaurateurs to come and be part of it, sold tickets, and we ended up giving Women Against Abuse $25,000.
Wow.
So we started doing these type of philanthropic events. And I think that kind of, made us a little bit more unique. But the thing that really drove us was that we started having these basically like almost farmer market fairs in front of our operations in 2020. And people started, Bridget Foy named it Sisterly Love Food Fair. And this Sisterly Love Fair took off, and people started following us and wanting to support women and wanting to support small businesses and restaurants. As you know, everybody experienced that during the pandemic, but we just kept sticking to this woman owned, like trying to help each other model.
Hmm.
And eventually, Sisterly Love kind of became its own thing. We're a 501c3 through Le Don Stafier, and we are now focused, now that we're, nobody needs the fairs anymore. I shouldn't say that, not nobody needs the fairs anymore. Um, Restaurants
Yeah, I
don't need
understand.
the fairs anymore. But what happened during the pandemic was all these people who were at home started these homegrown businesses.
Hmm.
And so in Philadelphia, for example, there's a woman named Noelle Blizzard who started New June Bakery. So these cottage businesses from home,
Yep.
Fishtown Pickles, Mother Butter. So these CBG products that started growing, and then we really felt that there was a need to bring women together to help support them with growing their business. And a lot of these women feel alone when they're at the very beginning of their journeys. And so they have a network of business people, people who have experience in different aspects, whether it be marketing, HR, financing, um, city relationships,
Yeah,
whatever it may
yeah,
be.
I'm looking at the
And so
group.
we've
It's
been
really
focused,
cool.
really focused on that. So now we have close to, I think, probably 100 or more paid members. We have a community of probably 6 to 7,000, people who are, adjacent to us. We have a caretaker mother um, uh, circle that tries to support women with children or who are taking care of the elderly. We have a circle for women on the line who are, Amanda Schulman is spearheading this. This is women cooks who want to become chefs or owners and what they need to do to get from point A to point B. We are trying to expand into the suburbs. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
And I'm a co-leader with Jennifer Carroll from
Hmm.
Eat CCC, and she was Top Chef
Yep.
contestant. Jill Weber from Sojourn Hospitality, who owns several restaurants, and Sophia DeLeon, who is with El Mercury, Guatemalan street food, and created her own rum brand. So, a diverse group of women leaders. And then we actually have a board of directors that includes other people as well.
I love that. It's so, uh, um, well, it's just so impactful. It looks like I'm actually I'm just looking at the website now, sisterlylovephilly.com, and there's a bunch of events and cookbooks as well. Was by the way was Kiki Arnita part of this at some point, or some?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I think I might have heard her mention that. Okay, so you started that, and you also started this thing, the Wonton project during COVID, which has now sort of
Right.
blossomed into a lot more. So I'm sorry, I keep asking about all your businesses, but
Well, that would be one that if I had unlimited resources that I would really focus on, because it's one of my pet projects. As you know, I'm not a chef, but um, I think, I learned a lot about myself during the pandemic, just like everybody else.
mhm,
And one of the things that I started thinking about was, my mother was an incredible cook, and I always wanted to have a small little restaurant that kind of featured her dishes, but I could never make it come to fruition. So during the pandemic, I was just thinking, what is a ghost kitchen? And since Fork isn't going to have any indoor people, what could Fork be like a ghost kitchen for another concept? So I started thinking about that, and I really only know how to make a few things. My mother taught my brother how to make everything, and
what?
I was really focused on school and my career. So I didn't learn how to cook anything from my mother, really. So the one thing I feel confident about was I could make wonton.
Hmm.
And so I started testing the recipe. And then the shootings in Atlanta started happening. And I started reading more and more in the newspaper about people resenting Asians in Chinatown because they felt like they had were part of bringing COVID to the US. And I mean, just this craziness.
Yeah.
And so I started really thinking about myself because I don't think I really thought of myself as anything. I'm just like kind of a restaurateur. When I look in the mirror, of course, I see myself as being Asian, but I never really thought of myself as belonging to the Asian American community. And so I just wanted to do something that made me feel like I was doing something to help.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that I did a TEDx talk at Penn. I realized how many other Asian or American-born Asians felt similarly to me. And so it really kind of helped me understand who I am as a person and as an Asian American and what role I have. And the Wonton Project is kind of a vehicle for helping to support Asian Americans in the Philadelphia area and beyond.
Yeah. So you make wontons. I see there's some boiled ones, there's some fried ones, and then I'm assuming some percentage of the proceeds go to like AIPI hate or something like that.
Exactly.
Got it. So that's the premise.
The charities that we support, one is Asian Americans United, which is a Philadelphia-based nonprofit. They're actually fighting to save Chinatown in Philadelphia. There's a sports stadium that is being contemplated, and they are one of the voices.
Oh wow!
Trying to preserve Chinatown. The other is CMAP, which is an organization that supports immigrants and refugees in South Philadelphia. And the last one is Advancing Justice, which is a national organization that speaks out against discrimination.
Got it. CMAC is the organization, is that?
Southeast Asian.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. That's so amazing. I loved all of the sort of businesses and initiatives that popped up during COVID. It was so like great to see an IRC kind of like blossoming during that time. I remember I was actually supposed to launch my company in April or May of that year, and I decided not to launch a technology company for restaurants and just create this thing called Recipes for Relief. And we basically like gave the product away and built a consumer app and let chefs sell their recipes to their customers, and raised a couple $100,000. It was all the proceeds went to the chefs and their businesses. But
yeah, I saw that. That was incredible.
But it was just we were one of many doing things like that. It was just so cool to see how restaurants were so heavily impacted by COVID just like stepped up and did things. What I love to see is that like this Wonton project is still alive. It's amazing.
We're still making them and trying to figure out how to expand it into some sort of brick and mortar.
Yeah. Who's making them? Because they were your mom's recipes, and then that you sort of recreated. So did you hire a different team for that, or is that part of your current kitchen team? Or
well, originally it was being made at Fork. So and crazy enough, once we decided to launch it, then everything opened up. So there were some days when I was making them,
Awesome.
and training, our culinary intern to support me on that.
Yep.
And then, we moved it to High Street after Fork opened because we have a takeout business there. So it makes a lot of sense. And so right now the wontons are being made by the team at High Street.
Yeah. I'm curious where you source I don't know if you make the skins. I always make like I'll make like wonton or shumai filling and pre-portion it and freeze it in my freezers just so I can have them when I want. But I only ever find like the square or the round like little packs. You know what I'm talking about, like the little packs of where do you source the wonton skins from?
I like to use the Shanghai style wonton skins, and I try to look for the thinnest that I possibly can. Of course, as a bakery, we have a sheeter, so we could be doing them ourselves, but we're just not quite there yet.
That's that's an undertaking.
Right, exactly. I don't know whether it's worth it or not, because already, I mean, it's a labor. And first of all, we use Lancaster County pork and shrimp. So they are they are probably a luxury wonton, if you want to call it that. A dozen we sell for $15, but that is the true cost. And it's a meal. It's not an appetizer. It's a meal. So I think that's for the value that you get, it's reasonable, but some people might think, oh my God, that's ridiculous. I would never pay $15 for, 12 wontons. That's crazy.
Well, if you want commodity meat and,
But if you want to add the handmade skins to
exactly,
that.
That's a whole other thing. But, I think it's just, you focused on like good quality, like meat and shrimp and the people making it, like the skin. I mean, it's a whole. It's
super homey and comfort food, and
I love that.
I'm never tired of eating them.
Okay,
sure.
I'm almost wrapping you up here. I promise. You are on more boards than I care to count because I'm like, why am I not? Delaware. I'm going to read a couple. Delaware River Waterfront Corp, Old City Community Fund, the Art and Theater Company, and Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center. I believe you're on the board, or at least an advisor to Open Table as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
How does all this happen? How do you get on all these boards?
When the semi-quincentennial was being planned, there was a small committee of people who, we were somewhat involved with, but it all started because the bottom line is, as a restaurant, and I think everybody knows this by now, when you are part of a community, especially if you're an independent restaurant, you're part of your community. And our direct community of Fork is Old City. And so I joined the Old City District Board, which is responsible for, cleaning, safety, and marketing of the Old City District as a community in Center City, Philadelphia. And, I started there. Then I also really take pride in being part of, in 1997, when we opened, the Art and Theater just opened its doors in Old City, Philadelphia. And I felt that, supporting the arts in Old City was going to be a really important part of making sure that the neighborhood was vibrant, that people were coming to visit it. And so I joined that board. So those two were the first two. And then Mayor Nutter invited me in 2009 to be on the board of Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, which is expanding the waterfront from Allegheny Avenue, which is near Fishtown, all the way down to South Philadelphia. And so that has been a really rewarding project because we've seen all these different piers get developed. And right now there's a new park being built over Highway 95, where people can walk directly from the city directly onto the waterfront.
Oh, that's great.
So that's exciting. And then Jefferson was where I worked in nonprofit before I worked in restaurants, and just have had a huge affinity to being part of the Jefferson community. So that's how I ended up on all these boards.
So some of them you sort of went after. You said, I want to be a part of this. I want to get involved. How does that?
Yeah.
You just call and say, hey, I'd like to be on the board. Is like, how does that work?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I think I having worked in nonprofit before and understanding how boards work, I knew that there are typically committees and other ways that you have to start before you can actually be on a board or invited to serve on a board, because it's actually a huge responsibility. And, you can't just show up at the meetings and not do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how often are you in a board meeting in a given month?
Maybe once a month. I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Well, Ellen, this was great. I really, really enjoyed. I mean, I could talk to you for a lot longer about the rest of your business and everything, but really, really.
Just to kind of finish where we started off, you asked me about Wharton, and you said your father who passed away really wanted you to go to Wharton. My father, who passed away, was just like, "Why do you want to go to Wharton? You should go. You're so smart. You should become a doctor or a lawyer."
Well, yeah.
And I was just like, no, I want to own a restaurant. I really want to own a restaurant, and I want to go to business school. And so that was how it started.
I I obviously, you learned a lot running a business over many years. Obviously, you know this as well as I do. I do sometimes regret because I would have, I do like the premise of what you can learn at a school like Wharton. Um, by the way, I didn't realize I'm rereading because I read, well, I'm actually reading a new version of a Benjamin Franklin biography by Walter Isaacson. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that he started Penn.
Yeah.
Well, what turned into Penn.
Uh-huh.
This guy, like, it's funny. I want to go back to Philly and just sort of look at all of the impact that
Pretty
specifically he had.
incredible.
It's insane. Fire departments and libraries, and it's amazing. And I think it probably has put a stamp on that sort of entrepreneurial spirit of and that community spirit of Philly, of what he started there. So, anyways, that was a tangent, but but this was great. Really grateful that we got to chat. I'm sure we'll meet in person again soon, and I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to come visit Philly. But thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah.